I've liked airplanes since the early 60s. I can remember being in the third grade when we lived in Glenview, a northern suburb of Chicago. O'Hare was only 10 miles away, and the traffic of the final approaches for runways 22 left and right made the airplanes a constant sight and sound. Better yet, Navy airplanes flew much closer to the house because the Glenview Naval Air Station was only 3.5 miles away. Our house at Golf Court was situated under the final approach for the main runway. Being that close meant planes flew low and slow overhead, about 1,500 feet, and I was hooked. I often gazed up at the airplanes, wondering what it must be like traveling above the treetops. The lure of an airfield so close by inspired me as a 9-year-old to hike to the airbase. Several times each summer, I'd make myself a lunch of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and a package of Twinkies, strap on my Army surplus web belt and canteen, and off I'd go. After walking through a short stretch of downtown Glenview, I walked along the shoulder of Lehigh Avenue and kept going north, with the railroad tracks on one side and the airbase on the other. By now I was getting close, so my ears perked up, listening for any sounds of airplane activity. A prop plane running up or a blast from a jet engine would always get my attention and cause me to quicken my pace. Another 1.5 mile walk along Lehigh, which was the length of the runway, and there I was, at the north end of the field where Willow Road goes over the railroad tracks. The grassy hill of the overpass was my destination, a perfect high point to sit down and have a commanding view of the runway, the ramps, and the control tower. If I was lucky that day, pilots would be practicing touch and goes, providing hours of plane watching, with them zooming right over my head. On other days, when the Navy held an open house like July 4th, my mother would give me a ride to the base in the morning and drop me off at the front gate, waving goodbye and reminding me to be at the gate at 5 when the base closed to the public. I would walk down the main drive and gaze around at the various buildings, wondering what went on inside. I really enjoyed walking through the hangars, seeing planes up close and their insides exposed, smelling the hydraulic fluids and other airplane odors so typical of these complex machines. One highlight I still remember is when I walked up to a small crew of mechanics still working on an airplane. I stood and watched for quite a while as the men finished up their tasks. One of them turned to me, seeing my interest, and took the time to explain what they were working on, pointing out the various parts of the engine. That summer day was a sweltering one, and he asked me if I wanted a cup of water. "Sure," I stammered. He pointed to a cooler in the corner of the hangar and motioned for me to follow. Standing at the cooler, the mechanic cautioned me about the summer heat, saying that they were all instructed to maintain their body's salt levels by eating salt tablets when it was hot outside, so he offered me one, which I gladly accepted. I felt mighty important that morning, standing away from the spectator crowd, being in the company of the Navy personnel. We parted company with a wave of the hand, and I continued my self-led tour of the base and the flight line.